Live from New York, this is WIUR Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to WIUR Radio. I am Michael Marchiona, and this is the Notes app. This thing is just a podcast based off of topics that I have written down in my Notes app. So, starting with our first topic. So recently I had worked media as I went with the newspaper. I had worked media for the Iona Manhattan Gold Rush game, and I was talking with some of the people before the game, and we all realized that Iona and Manhattan does not have a rivalry game. We played almost 110 games against each other. Iona has won 66 of them. So, we're up ahead, but we don't have a rivalry for the name. Not like the Red River Shootout or the Battle of the Bronx more locally with Manhattan and Fordham. But so I, in my ever wisdom, decided to write down a few names that came to my mind. So the first one I have here is the great something based off like the greatest story never told or the greatest I call it like the greatest basket never scored. Um for those that don't know, it's a reference to an episode of Justice League Unlimited, which goes around the hero Booster Gold. And as you know, Iona and Manhattan's game, at least our home game, is the Gold Rush game, where everyone wears gold, like the gold jerseys, everyone wears gold in the stands. And I figured gold, green, Manhattan's green. So in a sense, that had made sense color wise. Because the colors Booster Gold, Green Lantern, that kind of mix. The other name I had the Cross County Clash. So, something like the Red River Shootout or Battle of the Bronx is more based off like a geological thing. Red River separates, I believe, Texas A&M and Oklahoma. Separates two of the universities in the SEC. Battle of the Bronx, Fordham and Manhattan are two Division One schools based in the Bronx. Uh, Manhattan's based in Riverdale, and Fordham is based in both Rose Hill and another campus. And typically that's the dividing line. Usually a lot of these are geographical. So the cross county clash, if you look at a map, I actually did this earlier. There is a separation between Iona and Manhattan. Obviously, Iona is based in Westchester County and Manhattan is based in the Bronx. But if you go through there, best way to get there by car would be by taking the Cross County Parkway, which passes by the Cross County Shopping Center. Both of those being also extremely close to the Bronx, sort of like the in between the Bronx and Manhattan, Bronx and and Westchester, specifically more based in Yonkers, which is closer. So, if we're going based off like a geographical thing, that would make the most sense. The third name I came up with was the Beeline Battle because going by public transportation, you can take a beeline to, I believe, both to and from Manhattan to Iona. So, but typically the beeline battle could also apply to a lot of different schools, a lot of the high schools in Westchester County. You could take the beeline back and forth from a lot of the colleges in the area. You could take the beeline back and forth from, so if like Pace, Manhattanville, stuff like that. Um, so yeah, there's really like a lot of different combinations I feel like you could go with here. Um, there's a lot of you go based on anything that's like green, gold, like maroon or red, or like I believe Manhattan's alternate color is white. You can go with a lot of different names here, a lot of different geographical locations. Personally, for me, I think the Cross County Clash is probably the best possible name. It does sound a bit generic, but in my opinion, I feel like that is probably the best name because it represents like, sort of like a difference in obviously a difference in location instead of it being like Battle of the Bronx or Battle of like Manhattan or like Battle of LA in a sense with USC and UCLA. Um, it's sort of like just a I don't want to say demarcation geographically, but like a difference between like the county is based off something that's recognizable in the area. Like I'm pretty sure if you go down in the Bronx, a lot of people know about the Cross County Shopping Center or the Cross County Parkway. A lot of people over here know about the Cross County Parkway or Cross County Shopping Center. So there is a lot of, you know, recognizability, familiarity with what the name stands for. Moving on to our next topic. Our next topic is something that's that's really interesting to me. I'm pretty sure a lot of you might not know, but I am a big fan of music. I like to listen to a lot of music. Last year, I listened to 120 projects that released in 2025. If you're wondering, my favorites were. Give me a second here. I should have a doc for this. Well, I can tell you right now, my favorite album of the year was Te Vi Tirar Mas Fotos by Bad Bunny. My second was A Matter of Time by Lefe. I should have it here. Okay, so yeah, my top 10 albums from last year were number. Okay, yeah. So my number 10 album of the year was God is Like a Lily by JID. Number 11 was America's Next Top Party by Party of Two. Number 10 was Oi by YT. Wait, no. Number 8, yeah. Number 8 was Oi by YT. 7 was Fancy That by Pink Panthers. 6 was Black British Music 2025 by Jim Legacy. 5 was Like God Storm Out by Clips. Okay, I messed it up. But I'm saying like my music taste is very varied, I wanna say. Like the only typical things that I don't have on my rotation are country. I've never really been a fan of country music. And also, kind of more like electronic. Like there's a difference between like electronic and house. Like I tend to listen to a lot of Kaytranada. Kaytranada was my number 2 artist last year behind Bad Bunny. And so it really depends, but on that, but mostly like my big no is country music. So far, January has been a very big month for music. Not very big month, but still like a big month announcement wise. Bruno Mars had announced The Romantic. J. Cole announced finally announced the date for the Fall Off, which had been in production for the past few years. Um, ASAP Rocky finally released Don't Be Dumb after like a few years. But so far, I have listened to 4 albums that released this year going in release order. The first album I listened to of the year was Chapter 1 by Salt, which is the band with Cleo Sol as the vocalist. I am not I was not necessarily a big fan of this project. It was okay from a production and from a vocal standpoint. Like I recognize the talent. It just didn't really like it didn't really connect with me like Chapter 10 did, or a lot of Salt's previous projects didn't really connect with me. There weren't really a lot of songs that I liked per se. I believe the only ones that ended up making my playlist of a lot of all like the songs I liked were track 2 and track 3, which are Chapter 1 and Fulfill Your Spirit. For a 10-track album, only 2 of them making my playlist of songs that I like, which is over essentially close to 3,000 songs long. That really kind of speaks to not the quality, but the lack of connection with the album. Probably won't, but I might give it a re-listen at some point just to see how it will turn out with newer ears, maybe sometime later in the year. One album that I did listen to in 2026 and has had a constant spot in my rotation is Don't Be Dumb by A$AP Rocky. Um, Personally, like, people have been waiting for this album for years. I have been waiting for this album for years, and it finally came out, and overall, I thought it was a great album. I do feel like there were some lows. More specifically, I was not a big fan of STFU with Slay Squad. Um, but personally, I thought a lot of the albums really great. Punk Rocky was good. I really liked the production on it. really the only thing that stuck out to me on that, but probably my 3 favorite songs were, "Whiskey Release Me" with West Side Gun and Gorillaz, um, "Fish and Steak," and also "Robbery" with Doji. Overall, I thought it was a great album. Uh, Probably not like all-timer, probably more like an 8 out of 10. Probably would be something I'd buy on CD because I do have a CD collection, but it's not like something I'd say is in contention for, like, the greatest album of all time. The 3rd album was ETDS, a mixtape by IDK. Overall, really good album. IDK has been one of the artists I've been kind of following over the past few years. More specifically since what was the album name? Give me a second here. More specifically since Is He Real in 2019. Um Personally, I thought this album was really good. It was not good as Bravado Intimo from 2020 from last year, well 2024 and last year because he released the deluxe this year and took the original off streaming. But I thought it was a really good album. Uh Favorite songs on that one being Clover, Life for a Life, and Everyone Knows. Uh and then the 4th album I listened to this year, uh literally just listened to it like right before the podcast aired, like an hour before we went live, was Birthday Blizzard 26, J. Cole's newest mixtape. This is going to be a odd comparison that I will get into it later, but this is like the Great Muda Bye Bye of mixtapes. Um, for context, J. Cole is his last album, or at least his planned last album, is The Fall Off, which releases not this Friday, but next Friday. And this is kind of, I feel like, a return to form, kind of after what was the album? Sorry, give me a second. After his album from 2024, where he had this 7-minute drill, which ended up being it was better than Might Delete Later. It was 100% better than Might Delete Later. I have not listened to the off season in a couple years, so I'm not sure about the quality. I'm not sure how it stacks up against that or Revenge of the Dreamers. I feel like it is better than KOD. Um, KOD I think is a good album. It is not the best in Cole's discography, but it is not a bad album either. Um, but I feel like, yeah, Birthday Blizzard 26 is a probably one of Cole's better works if you stack it up. It just, in my opinion, obviously, I feel like I do need to re-listen to all of Cole's discography with new ears just to see where it stacks up. 4 tracks, about 11 minutes, produced by DJ Clue. Very great album, probably have it right below the Rocky album in my album of the year rankings. Both of them around like a 8 out of 10. I do think Rocky's is closer to like an 8.25 than an 8, and then Cole's is closer to an 8 than an 8.25. But also we have a lot of upcoming albums. There's specifically 8 on my list that I'm interested in listening to once they come out. Going in chronological order, this Friday sees the release of Backward by Jordan Ward. Jordan Ward, another artist that has been on my radar for a bit, uh, specifically with songs like Fam Jam and what's the other one? Sorry, I need to go through my playlist. Jordan Ward. Yeah, Fam Jam 4000 off of Forward and Lil Baby Crush off of the EP Remain Calm. 2 songs that I really liked of his, probably among some of my favorite songs, both of his and probably among, like, some of the songs that end up going in my rotation a lot. He is releasing one of his newest album on January 30th. Then, the following week, February 6th, big week of music for me. Joji's new album drops. Joji's first album, I believe, since 2022. Give me a second. But yeah, I believe it's his first new album. First new album to Smithereens in 2022. Joji, again, guy that's been on my radar for like a decade. I've been following him since he was Pink Guy. Um, so seeing how far he's come, sort of like the rebrand, really good. Joji probably amongst one of my favorite artists, and I am happy to see where he goes with this. Also on February 6th, as mentioned before, J. Cole's quote unquote retirement album, The Fall Off. Obvious big fan of J. Cole, huge fan of J. Cole. He is releasing The Fall Off on February 6th. So really looking forward to that, especially after Birthday Blizzard 26 kind of, I don't want to say subverted expectations, but like sort of like blew it blew it blew Mike the Lead Later out of the water. So I feel like that's like I'm sort of like more hyped for the album other than, oh, it's J. Cole's last album. Also, Do You Still Love Me by LMA releases February 6th. Supposedly, Jason Tatum is on a track. I not 100% certain about that. I remember reading that somewhere, but that if that is like regardless, I do like LMA's music and I do want to give this album. I do plan on giving this album a listen, but it's just more funny to me if Tatum's actually on the album. Uh, then nothing really interesting to me comes out until February 27th, which again, another huge week of music for me. The Romantic by Bruno Mars finally drops on February 27th, as well as The Mountain by Gorillaz. Bruno Mars hasn't released any albums since An Evening with Silk Sonic, the album he did with Anderson .Paak, another album I own on CD. Great album. Um, but I listened to the single off of it. I Sorry, give me a second. I forgot the name off the top of my head. I listened to I Just Might, and Bruno Mars essentially just a certified hit maker. Uh, he is probably one of the greatest artists of our generation. Definitely album that I'm looking forward to. Definitely interested, and I'm just waiting for February 27th to drop. And also the Gorillaz album. Back in like middle and high school, I did have middle and like early high school, I did have like a Gorillaz phase where like they were probably like my favorite band. And that kind of fell off, but then sort of like came back in the past few years. Gorillaz, I believe, were 14th on my Apple Music replay last year. Specifically, more songs from Song Machine and from a lot of their mix of their newer work and their older work, specifically stuff like Feel Good Inc. And stuff from Demon Days didn't necessarily show up in my playlist, but stuff from like Song Machine, stuff from the self-titled, stuff from Plastic Beach ended up showing up there. And I did listen to a few of the singles in the lead up to it, and I am again also a lot of hype for this album, in my opinion. Sideshow is also releasing an album February 27th. Sideshow is an artist gotten introduced to from artists like Mike and Loopers through their works from last year. Uh, Different, sort of like different from obviously the other two releasing February 27th, but still another album I'm excited for. And then out of the announced albums, the last album that I'm looking forward to is Strictly for the Scythe. New album by Denzel Curry and the rest of his collective, which I believe is Tia Kareen, the former ASAP Ferg, and a couple other artists. Denzel Curry, another artist that I also really enjoy. Um, Albums like Melt My Eyes See Your Future and Melt My Eyes See Your Future has been in my rotation a lot. I have the album on CD. Unlocked, the album of Kenny Beats, was one of my favorite albums for like a really long time, and that's still in my rotation, not as much as it was back in like 2020 and 2021, but still something that's in my rotation. And yeah, as for artists that I think might drop this year. I think Steve Lacy might be dropping. I'm not 100% certain because I remember the last thing he said about the album was that it's not releasing until you appreciate Gemini rights more, which honestly understandable. Gemini rights and another album I really have in my rotation. I haven't listened to it in full in one full sitting in the past few years. In the past couple of years I really should do that, but Gemini Rights is a great album, and honestly, I'm looking Steve Lacy did release a single last year, so I'm hoping this leads to on the more on that. Will it happen this year? Who knows? If it happens, will I be listening to it? Definitely. All right. So moving on to the third topic. This one I actually don't have my notes at, but I have been thinking about this for a while. So I'm titling this segment, well, it's really the Untitled Wrestling segment, but today the topic is so you want to stop watching the Evil Empire, a guide to not watching the WWE. So, as you may know, I am a fan of professional wrestling. I do wrestling photography on the independents, specifically in this area. And one thing I don't watch is I don't watch the WWE. It just doesn't really appeal to me among other things outside of the fact the product doesn't really interest me. But there is like a lot of wrestling outside of this. One of the like biggest things that I end up consuming is a lot of the stuff on YouTube. So there's a lot of stuff on YouTube either behind memberships or just out there. If you're looking for behind memberships, I really do recommend CMLL, Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre, the biggest lucha promotion in the world, in Mexico specifically. Um, a lot of their top stars have appeared on AEW. Hechicero, Mascara Dorada, and Persephone have dual contracts with AEW. Mystico also probably their top star for anyone that does watch the WWE that did watch WWE in the 2010s. You might know him as Sin Cara, the first Sin Cara, not the second one that was played by currently on the Mexican Indies, Cinta de Oro. Um, CMLL typically runs a few shows a week. They run their big weekly show on Friday, but they also run shows on Tuesdays, on Saturdays, on Sundays, on Mondays. Even though Mondays are more aired for local TV in Puebla. CMLL, great product. Probably one of my favorite, was probably in my top 5 for promotions of the year last year. Um, Definitely in the front running this year so far, with a lot of the action just being consistently great. It's a lot more like the lucha style, so if you're a lot more into that, that would be good. I mean, lucha style is really dependent because lucha style consists of a lot of technical wrestling, a lot of high flying, a lot of essentially a bit of everything. But typically, like, yeah, if you're into lucha or you want to get into lucha, CMLL will be your best bet. It is behind a membership, and I don't remember the prices off the top of my head, but if you go on their YouTube page, they do air their Tuesday show filmed in Guadalajara compared to the Tuesday show in Arena, Mexico. That show does end up going on for free on their YouTube channel on Thursdays. So if you want to get a sampler, at the very least, a sampler of what CML has to offer, their Tuesday shows in Guadalajara are aired for free. Even on YouTube, there's like a lot of things like going on the lucha thing. There's a lot of the Mexican independent scene, lucha independent scene on YouTube, where I found the likes guys like El Hijo de Fishman, Mascara Sagrada, Nueva Generacion, Los Mexa Boys with IWRG also streams their weekly shows for free on YouTube. Um, so like you'll end up finding a lot of guys there. Also on YouTube, you'll have a lot of like the US independents stream, like not stream their shows, but will drop their shows on YouTube. There are some that do stream their shows for free. The big ones being Jersey Championship Wrestling, which is based out of New Jersey, obviously, um, run by Orange Crush Art, and also a sub brand of the Game Changer Wrestling promotion. uh, they are one of the biggest promotions that stream their stuff on YouTube. You'll see people from AEW, from Ring of Honor, sometimes people from Japan, will come over. Sometimes you'll see like the WWE ID guys come in. Currently, their champion, the JCW champion, is Billy Starks, who will be going into the Jersey J Cup, which takes place on February 6th, 7th, 6th and 7th. Sorry about that. 6th and 7th for the in the White Eagle Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. Um, there's also a lot there. They're also running a show and also to raise money for the neurodivergent community on February 1st. Also, West Coast Pro, based in California, does stream their stuff on YouTube. They used to stream it on IWTV, another really great streaming service I would recommend, $9.99 a month. Has a lot of has a lot of indie stuff on there, both new and old. Um, so that is also an option. West Coast Pro does stream their stuff. West Coast Pro also works with a lot of independent promotions like Pride Style in Las Vegas and Action Wrestling down in Georgia. Um, Again, also like I mentioned earlier, IWTV also a streaming service has a lot of like American independents. A lot of also okay, also a lot of different sort of like stuff on the independent scene, both around the world, more specifically in the US and Mexico, and also in Germany. Wrestle Universe for a lot of the stuff in Japan, and just a lot of different things out there. I feel like you just have to look. For next week there'll be a lot to talk about. At the very least, I know the wrestling segment will be the best of what I had watched in January of 2026. As for the music and the other segment, I am not 100% certain yet, but you'll have to tune in next week to find out. And thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you tuning in next week.